Hi, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Wherever you find us, whether it's a video on YouTube or on your favorite podcast platform, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. You can also find us on major social media platforms where I give you a heads up about upcoming shows and which date and time they will be aired. If you go to MiamiGhostChronicles.com, you can find links to the shows, MP3 files which you can download, or links to your favorite platform like iTunes, Spreaker, SoundCloud, and all other major sources. You can find information for upcoming and past talk show appearances as well as new book projects at MarlenePardo.com. You can also purchase books and merchandise there. And you can visit my author page on Amazon at Marlene Pardo Pellicer. Due to popular demand, I'm narrating my True Believer stories that I've collected throughout the years in a new series called Supernatural Storytime. You can find links at supernaturalstorytime.com. If you are into classic horror, ghost, and adventure stories, I narrate some of those at Nightshade Diary, and you can find links at nightshadediary.com. If you would like to read noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird, you can visit the Stranger Than Fiction Stories tab at MiamiGhostChronicles.com. I do want to thank you all for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi everybody, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, Stories of the Supernatural. How's everybody doing today? Good, I hope I'm doing really well. Being a micro farmer and all, and as you all know, I'm still doing. I'm 1 year into it, so I'm kind of actually catching up with the trees and my chickens and all that. And of course, you always know that I got all my pets running around, and you'll hear my birds. And the reason why I bring that up is over here the sun is starting to go down, and it's just about this time that my birds they start. Whether it's I got some parrots and the chickens, they start making their end of the day weird noises. So you all know what that's about. And then of course in the background, my dogs decide that they've got to chime in as well. But anyway, guys, let me tell you a little bit about our guest today. And I'm super excited about this because we're going to talk about, you'll see. But let me go ahead and tell you a little bit about the gentleman that we have here today. His name is Preston Dennett. Now, Preston began investigating UFOs and the paranormal in 1986 when he discovered that his family, friends, co-workers were having dramatic, unexplained encounters. You know, we're going to ask him about that. Since then, he has interviewed hundreds of witnesses and investigated a wide variety of paranormal phenomena. He's a field investigator for MUFON, a ghost hunter, a paranormal researcher, and the author of 22 books and more than 100 articles about UFOs and the paranormal. Now, his articles have appeared in numerous magazines, including Fate, Atlantis Rising, MUFON UFO Journal, Nexus Paranormal Magazine, Mysteries Magazine, and other ufologist writings and magazines and blogs. His writing has been translated into several different languages. He's appeared on numerous radio and television programs. So, of course, you know that I'm very happy and excited to have him with us tonight. But let me bring him on. How are you doing today, Preston?
I'm doing great. I'm doing really well. Thank you.
I'm so happy to speak to you because we're going to talk about a lot of different things. But I'm going to ask you what I ask all my guests at the beginning. How did you get interested in this field, whether it's the UFOs or the paranormal? Was it a childhood experience, something as an adult? What happened with you?
I was always pretty skeptical of the paranormal and UFOs both, which is weird because I did have a couple of weird paranormal experiences when I was a kid.
Okay.
I do remember one time I was like 9 years old. My sister was next to me on the couch, and there was a game show on, Treasure Hunt or something. I forget what it was called, but you had to guess these various, puzzles. Okay. And there was a check boxes. There was like 80 boxes. It was sort of, a game show. Mm-hmm. But the point is, I knew the answer to every single question on the show right before it happened. Wow. And I was like 9. My sister and I we just giggled, thought it was the most funniest thing ever. It wasn't later until I thought, hey, that was kind of paranormal.
Yes.
So there was a hint of something coming, and that was it.
Yes.
But yeah, grew up skeptical of this stuff.
Right, because when we're kids, stuff like that happens to you, and just kids like they take it in stride and then just keep on going. They never really think too long and deep about it being paranormal or weird.
Yeah, boy, when I look back, I'm like, wow, that's crazy. I started to have other experiences much later on in life.
Okay.
But that was an early one that always puzzled me. It's sort of my introduction to the paranormal.
Okay.
But totally ignored it. Didn't believe in it.
Okay.
Was very skeptical. Heard a report on the news in November. I remember this vividly. November 1986, about a sighting over Alaska. Right?
Okay.
A pilot sees a UFO, and I'm like, yeah, right. Don't believe it for a second. But remembered that my brother Mark had seen or he said he saw a UFO. And I'm like, oh, Mark. Okay, let's talk to Mark. Right?
Okay.
I asked him, I'm like, well, tell me about that UFO you said you saw. And he describes this metallic object with colored lights on it, a dome, your typical flying saucer, and he's chasing it down the street.
He's what? Like, yeah. He's chasing it down the street? Okay.
Yeah, in a car. He's a teenager, and he's with his other friends. Right. Greg and Phil were with him, his two friends, and they're barreling down the road chasing this thing, passing other cars also chasing it.
Okay.
And I'm like, well, let me talk to Phil. I want to talk to Greg because I was intrigued. I'm like, this is weird. I believed him, but I couldn't believe it.
Right.
So, and they described the same thing. And I started asking people. It was a big mistake, really.
Okay.
Because I found out that my sister-in-law had a sighting, had a face-to-face encounter with gray-type ETs.
Wow.
Brought it up at work. Lady's like, oh, yeah, me and my whole family watched this UFO darting around. And Dorothy
Incredible what you find out when you ask, huh?
Yeah, these are people I loved. I worked with for years and years. I was scandalized. I'm like, hey, why didn't you tell me? I was mad. I was. But they're like, well, you wouldn't have believed me.
Right. I was about to say, they probably thought you were going to be like, nah, that's not true.
Yep. And they don't want to look like fools, and they're not into trying to convince anybody. Sure. They know what they saw.
Understandable.
But yeah, Dorothy walks in. Love Dorothy. Worked with her for years and years and years. And she's like, oh, yeah, one followed us home from the library. Me and my best friend. My mom was driving. She's like, it's weird, Preston. We live 5 minutes from the library. It closes exactly at 9. That's when we got out. This thing follows us home. It had, colored lights all around the perimeter. Okay. Silver dome-shaped object, completely silent, maybe 50 feet up, right over their car. They get home. It's 5 minutes away. They run upstairs, and they see this thing dart away, and they look at the clock, and it's now 10:15. So she's like, I don't know what happened to the time.
They lost an hour.
Right. And mind you, this is back in 1988. She's telling me this.
Yes.
86, around there. And that was before, Bud Hopkins' book, Missing Time, had become a bestseller.
Right. People don't realize that once upon a time, yes, of course, there was stuff about UFO, but it's not like now with the internet and all these shows that it wasn't like it is now. There wasn't as much coverage or publications out there.
I was freaking out. I freaked out because I thought, well, we're being invaded by aliens and no one's talking about it. I'm like, what the hell is going on? This is not good news. I was really upset. It hit me like a ton of bricks. It wasn't good news.
So what happened? They're telling you this story. So it sounds like you're keeping on. Like this is once they put that saying that you got to be in your bonnet. You couldn't get rid of that idea of what is going on. If I've got all these different people saying they've had experiences.
Yeah, and I'm like, this couldn't possibly be true. And I looked into it and found out that it is true. There's decades. Going back, people have been studying this very seriously. It's a subject that's taken very seriously by high levels of government. Mm-hmm. Apparently, there's a cover-up. Our tax dollars are being used to make UFO witnesses look like fools.
Well, you know what? Yeah, I've heard of, especially now, I think, you see a lot of efforts, it sounds almost like to discredit a lot of people that otherwise would be taken more seriously, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was much worse back then. It's getting better now, for sure. Yeah. But, I mean, the way that our military has handled the subject leaves a lot to be desired.
Yes. Even though there sounds like recently they're starting to come around a little bit, but I almost think I want to say it's because they're almost like backed into a corner where they're being forced to, because they have to. There's too much evidence or too many sightings or there's just too much overwhelming evidence, I think.
I mean, some of these guys I've been able to interview them. It's a real honor. Like one guy, he was an electrician's mate on the USS Clamagore, a submarine with nuclear missiles on it. And he told me this amazing story of this USO, an unidentified submersible object, which came up and paced their submarine.
What?
Talked to another Navy guy, USS Long Beach, which is also nuclear, and this was, let's see, on the far side of Catalina Island, off the coast of Southern California here, and they all saw these 3 giant pulsating objects right there on the water, pretty far off, but definitely unexplained, and put the whole boat in an uproar.
I bet.
So these Navy guys I'm talking to are like, holy cow.
Yeah.
I mean, in the Clamagore case, it's really interesting because this object is pacing the submarine at night, right? This is 1971 on the East Coast.
Okay.
And one by one, all the major officers come up on deck. You know, the submarine's on the surface.
Right.
And they want to see this thing. And they take a brief glimpse of it. And finally, this thing shoots off. It came in at 100 knots and left at about 80. And the second in command turns to the commander and says, "How do you want me to report this in the log?"
You can imagine. It's like, okay, whatever you want me to, I'll just because I'm not, I can't.
And you know what the commander says?
What is he going to say?
The commander responds by saying, the commander says, "Officers who report this sort of thing do not move up in rank."
That's what I was thinking.
So,
right.
Here's a schizophrenic kind of situation where our military is, charged with patrolling our waters and yet can't talk about it.
Oh no, those stuff like that's like a career killer. That's it. I mean, it's like take your pick. You can either move up or advance if that's what you want, or say the story. But most of them opt for the I'll just describe something plausible, but whatever, but not what we actually saw. In other words. Yeah,
which is unfortunate. And this is a very important subject, clearly, if our government is taking it this seriously.
Well,
and
think about how many other stories there are out there, Preston, that nobody's ever talked about, that never, no, in other words, if for all the ones of the people that have come forward, or like the person that told you that story, how many do you think are out there that have never made the light of day? For the same reason. And maybe even some that were older, the people that were witness to it are long gone. They've died I'm sure there's a lot of untold stories.
I can't imagine. Well, I've actually looked into that a little bit because it intrigues me. Like, how common is the UFO experience, right? Because there was this quote from J. Allen Hynek, who's the father of modern ufology. Mm-hmm. And he said 1 in 40 people had an onboard UFO experience. And I thought, no way. That's way too many. Mm-hmm. And thought, okay, that's actually what got me seriously involved in, let's interview everyone I know. I know 40 people.
Okay.
And I found more than 5 people who've had a face-to-face encounter.
Wow.
Missing time or been taken on board.
Okay.
And so I'm thinking, well, this is pretty common.
Yes.
Probably. And I surveyed all the researchers, and I wrote an article for the MUFON Journal. Mm-hmm. And they published it. It's called 1 in 40. It's an epidemic. And it was about a year later, the Roper poll. Now, the Roper does regular surveys on all kinds of different subjects. Right. And they finally tackled UFOs. It's really cool.
Okay.
And they put together this questionnaire to see how many people are abductees.
Okay.
And they put in these little hidden questions like, do you see balls of light moving through your house? Have you had a close-up encounter? Have you experienced missing time? Do you have unexplained scars? These types of markers. And they found 1 in 50 people have had a UFO abduction, which is very close to what J. Allen Hynek said. Right. And I think it's higher than that.
Yeah, one thing is to have a sighting, and another thing is to have an abduction. that's different in a way, because some people have sightings, but there's no abduction involved.
Yeah, and as far as sightings, that's something I always ask people. I'm like, well, did you call MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, or NUFORC, the National UFO Reporting Center? Did you report your sighting? Did you call the police? Almost everyone says no. I'd be no. Right? So I'd be very generous if I said 1 in 10.
Yeah.
It's probably closer to 1 in 100.
Yeah.
And if that's true, if only 1 in 100 people report their sighting, well, here's the thing. NUFORC and MUFON both get dozens of reports daily.
Okay.
So if you can times that by 100, well, they're getting, sometimes they'll get 10, 20 reports. Times that by 100, that's 200 reports. That's a lot.
Yes, that is.
That means somewhere right now, someone's having a sighting. I am absolutely convinced that this is not like, a sighting every now and then.
No.
It is a constant activity of UFOs visiting our planet on a daily basis.
Well, the thing is, even when, let's say you pull out the people that mentally ill, liars, mistaken, whatever. Let's say you pull those out. That still leaves a lot of legit reports. A lot.
Yeah, a weird situation because it's not the subject that is really taken seriously. There's still an active cover-up. There is. While it is being slowly released, and we're getting this interesting stuff from the Pentagon, the Tic Tac incident, and all this sort of the pilots being allowed to report their encounters now. This is really interesting.
Let me ask you something. Do you think, and sometimes, do you think that they know a lot, or is it that we assume that they know a lot about these extraterrestrials, whatever, let's put it plural if there's more than one type, and they're almost afraid to come out and say, yeah, they do exist, but we know only this amount. We've been able to only back engineer so much, and there's a lot we don't know, and they're kind of almost afraid because let's face it, everybody's going to want to go, well, what's this, what's that, and they're going to be like, we don't know. I wonder if that's part of the problem of non-disclosure.
I'm sure you're right. I feel like it is a strong factor. There's many factors. Like you said, they painted themselves into a corner. This is the way they've always done it.
Yeah.
It is heavily compartmentalized. By that I mean people only know little bits and pieces of what's going on.
Right.
And of course, it's controlled by the whole, the 1%ers, the banking industry, the insurance industry, these type of super powers, I guess you might call them.
Well, I think if when you think of all the gazillion questions that the general population would have, I would think there's probably two. Number one, how many of them are there? And number two, are any of them hostile? Hostile as in, more than just observing us. And I think that if the governments, I want to say, worldwide, said we don't know to either or both of those questions, that would be a problem.
Yeah. Well, every official, I'll put that in quotes, government study, because the government studies are pretty, Blue Book was a joke.
You're right.
And the Condon Committee and the Robertson Panel, all these are, government-funded studies, which all concluded that there is no national security threat. Nothing there. There is no there, which is patently untrue. It's absolutely a national security threat if these things are abducting people.
Sure.
From a military standpoint, they're hovering over our missile bases and shutting off our missiles. They're hovering over our nuclear power stations, our dams, our Air Force bases. We've lost pilots. Yes. This is definitely a national security issue, for sure.
Yeah, can you imagine? Let's say that's a great example. All these things that are happening, and then the government has to come out and say, "Yeah, but we're powerless to stop it."
Yeah, which is basically what the situation they're in.
Yeah,
I don't think they're entirely powerless. We do have this technology, and as far as ETs being hostile, come on. Even a child, the first conclusion they come up with when they do their UFOs in a school project is they're not hostile because they haven't taken over yet, and they easily could. This is something we've known that they've been around for thousands of years and have a technology that's far superior to us. All the types of UFOs we're seeing, maybe not just grays or praying mantis or humanoid or We don't really know. But technology is far superior to ours. And no, I don't think they're hostile. I talked to a lot of people who've been taken on board these craft or seen them face to face. And I always ask that, do you think they're evil? What do you think? Mm-hmm. And the worst I get is like they were very uncaring or unfeeling.
Right.
But what we don't get is like sadism or torture or murder or just awful things that humans do.
Right.
So I'm very hopeful because what they're interested in is things that are really human. They're interested in our emotions. They're interested in warning people of ecological disaster, of alternative energy, of healing. This is when they give people messages, that's what they talk about.
Let me ask you, what do you think of the theory that the Greys are biomechanical?
I think some for sure are. I think it's a mistake to lump the Greys into one category. It's because we have all these bald, kind of grayish-skinned humanoids. It's easy to say, well, those are the Greys. And I don't think that's the case because we have like 3-foot-tall, sort of biomechanical android-type beings, which are very unfeeling because they don't have emotions. It's just not. And then there's the taller, kind of willowy 5-foot Greys, which can be very loving and definitely do have emotion, but not in sort of the body way that we humans do.
Right.
But it's absolutely there. I think there's a bunch of different types of Greys, and that's mostly what I see. People I talk to, some version of the Grey, but praying mantis comes up quite a bit, human-looking. And then there's this weird catch-all category. Literally, just before I was speaking with you, I was talking to this lady who had an amazing encounter in St. Louis, Missouri, at school. And she saw these kind of lumpy skinned, dark-skinned, 4-foot-tall beings with huge heads and dark eyes, but not a Grey, sort of, gosh, I don't even know how to describe it. She couldn't either. She's never seen another description like it. She's been looking for one for years.
So I was going to say I've never heard of that type before. And
right?
That doesn't mean anything really. It makes you wonder. Now, do you because I'm going to refer to the X-Files because that's one of the best known, shows out there that, makes you think that we know very well who they are, what they are, and we're basically we're in cahoots with these aliens so that they can even take humans. And I don't think it's that extensive. I don't think that I think maybe we've back engineered some of their technology just out of sheer coincidence because of accidents that's happened. But I think they're way up here and we're kind of down here. And I think maybe we're just waiting for that moment of real true contact.
I agree. I think there's at some level we're never going to be able to relate to some of these guys because they're just so far advanced.
Yes.
And it's going to be make big changes in our society if open official contact happens.
Yes.
Which could happen. I mean, there's no reason that can't take place. I do think we have the technology because I wrote this book called UFOs over California, and I'm like, gosh, there's like 10 crash retrieval stories in California. I didn't realize, and I wrote one, books for various states, and every single one of them had crash retrieval accounts.
Yeah, so all this thing about Roswell and all that which is the one everybody knows about, but you're saying basically that same scenario is played out in other places in the United States. Yeah,
a lot of times. And so what we're looking at is Air Force bases throughout the country, not just Wright-Patterson, not just Area 51 or Edwards or the more famous ones, but a lot of them are probably holding crashed UFOs and ET technology. And I think you're right. We only understand it to a very limited basis. At least this is the reports coming out from whistleblowers.
Right.
Some of whom I've talked to, but I certainly keep up on this. It's my understanding there's one ship they haven't even been able to open. They can't get inside it.
Right. In other words, yeah.
Right. And there's another one. They get inside of it, and there's nothing there. There's no, they can't find any engine room. They don't know how to fly it. It appears to be like, mind meld into it. You have
exactly. And I've thought of that. Like that's almost. In a way, when we have the fingerprint scan or the palm scan or the the iris scan, well, this is the equivalent for them. The only one that's going to move this thing around is going to, and we definitely We don't have the right DNA or biology for whatever turns this thing on. So that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a very interesting field because I've talked to people who are taken on board fairly regularly, or have had a lot of experiences, and every now and then people are taken to the engine room and told not only how these things work, but how to fly. They're taken to the control room.
Okay.
And they're taught how to steer these things. So,
and
fly them around. It's weird. I mean, why would the ETs do that? It's not entirely clear.
Do you think? Okay, there's a two-part question. Do you think they engineered our DNA? In other words, they've tinkered with human DNA, or do we have any hybrids, or have they produced any hybrids?
That's what the evidence is showing us. I'm not sure it's entirely conclusive.
Okay.
But it's sure, the more you dig into it, you're like, oh my gosh, because you go back into history and you see there's ancient writings that seem to support that theory, where humans mating with the gods type of thing.
Right.
You have
exactly.
You have missing links, Cro-Magnon, Neanderthal. You have this sudden, improvement in technology that is absolutely unprecedented after 40,000 years of being a caveman. Last 100 years, suddenly, what is going on?
Exactly.
And this is the reports that are coming directly out of, onboard UFO accounts. What I do find interesting is, the modern age of UFOs is 1947, right?
Right.
This super wave sweeps across the U.S. and the world, and it really hasn't stopped since. Before that, there were sightings, but pretty scattered. Occasional waves, but not really. Nothing like what we're seeing today. And certainly, as far as the abduction phenomena, not at any level to what we're seeing today. So it's unprecedented in human history, I think, to some extent. And
right.
So I think, that they're doing another step right now, and the hybrid babies is something I ran into immediately.
Okay.
As soon as I started doing research, again before Hopkins pretty much proved that it is going on.
Okay.
So I do think they're all about genetics. They're all into it. I think the Greys are probably very closely genetically related to us. This is what they've told abductees.
Right. Well, the reason why I'm thinking is because of course we only know within our construct as humans or species on this planet, as far as certain animals or certain things being able to mate, they have to be compatible on a genome level. So I'm thinking to myself, if there's any hybridization, maybe we were tinkered with, so that's why we're compatible in order to produce a hybrid. Otherwise, there's no way to make that work. You kind of when you think of it within our understanding, that's the thing. We're kind of limited with that.
Yeah, apparently there is lots of secret genetic works going on that we don't hear about in areas like Area 51 and other places. Mm-hmm. So I think we're probably far more advanced than is publicly known. And as far as the ET, they could be very advanced. Who knows what they could put together?
Let me ask you something. This is something I've heard about and makes me wonder. We always think of what you said, the government has all this information, but I'm also thinking, do you think any private corporations out there have basically gotten the one up on the government? Because they've got the deep pockets, let's face it. They could put a lab anywhere.
I think that's exactly what we're looking at. Well, we know for sure that the higher levels of the Navy, Army, and Air Force, U.S. and other countries, do have access to this information and hardware.
Okay.
But there was it MacArthur who warned us about the military-industrial complex?
Yes.
And the banking industries, the oil industries, the insurance industries, Monsanto, all these guys are on my naughty list. Yes, the answer to your question is for sure.
Right. In other words, they're not waiting to get an okay from the government. They want to be the ones that have power over whatever discoveries, whatever it is, and basically be equal partners with the government.
Yeah, I mean, look at the state of our planet in terms of economics. We had all these countries going bankrupt, and the greed that's choking our planet. So there are obviously evil forces at work here.
Well, no, of course, and where you ask yourself, well, how much is too much or enough, or whatever the case might be, and it makes you wonder if,
I think
part of their thing is just to watch how we do work this out.
There does seem to be a little bit of a laissez-faire attitude on the part of the ETs.
I'm thinking Star Trek Prime Directive mentality here. Let them work it out. We don't want to interfere, which I think is too late for that. But yeah, it makes you wonder how much of it they are observing us. In other words,
well, I know they do intervene. They do intervene on many cases. I wrote a book called The Healing Power of UFOs. It's my latest book, actually. And that covers 300 cases of people who are physically healed as a result of a UFO encounter. Of, you name it. I've got like 60 injury cases, cuts, bruises, broken legs, arms, broken neck, this type of thing.
Wow.
But beyond that, colds.
Well, let me ask something. Were they visited? Were they taken up? How were they healed? How was these people healed?
It falls into a number of different categories. A number of people get a visit in their bedroom, usually at night. A number of people are just driving around in their car or walking around and they're hit by a beam of light or a UFO flies over them. I would say the majority, about 50% of the cases, people are actually taken on board a craft, particularly if it's a serious condition they're being treated for. And I mean, I've got 40 cases of people cured of cancer. 15 of tumors being removed, a bunch of people's eyes, their eyesight being improved, dental work, serious diseases like diphtheria, AIDS, tuberculosis, diabetes. It's some tremendous evidence, and it really shows a really positive side to the ETs. And I know it sounds like fiction, but I've got cases from every major researcher, pretty much. Bud Hopkins, John Mack, David Jacobs, Barbara Lamb, Yvonne Smith. I could go on.
Yeah, because I know Yvonne Smith. I know she did back in the 90s a lot of hypnosis, regressing abductees as far as their experiences. She was one of the first ones that really started looking at, those hidden memories that people had.
Yeah, she's an amazing researcher. I really like her.
Now, what do you think? Okay, let's go down that road. Like you're saying, this is the positive. You've gotten all this research. What do you think is going on? Let's say when these cattle mutilations and things like this, which is kind of scares people because it's like, why are they doing this? Is that a different type of ET? You think that's doing that?
Yeah, I did look into this because I wrote UFOs over Colorado and UFOs over New Mexico, and they are the hardest hit in the United States.
Right.
So I looked into it, and it was really puzzling because, there's a definite UFO connection. There's not a whole lot of really direct stories of who's doing this or why. There's some speculation that what the ETs are doing is harvesting genetic material, which they use for whatever reason to produce babies, probably. Or perhaps they're testing levels of pollution and radiation. That's been brought up. There are black helicopters, though. There does seem to be a government factor to some of this. But as far as what's doing it, I mean, the technology used is beyond what we officially have, for sure.
Exactly.
And some of these things are like found in the tops of trees. The cattle, I mean.
Right. Yeah, I know that there's been so many. They tell you that, from predators, you name it. It's like all these weird theories, but some of them it's like, okay, none of that is explained by normal stuff. When I say normal, as in natural.
Yeah, and it's mostly cattle, but the truth is this occurs all over the world and with all kinds of animals, and there are a few scattered human mutilation cases. So yeah, that's alarming to say the least. And just like humans, I mean, I think what we're looking at is a bell curve of behavior, and not all ETs are going to be friendly.
Right.
I think you'd be terribly naive to think so. It's a wide universe out there.
Oh, yeah. This is why I was saying, is it the same ones? Maybe we have ones, like you said, that are more, how can I say, if not the friendliest, but at least they're just into observation. They're not into hurting. And there's others that might not be the same. I mean, just like there's different scientific methods out there by humans.
Well, I mean, here's one case from Constance Clear, who was a Midwestern researcher. She interviewed this guy named, I think it was Andrew from Texas, who was having all these phobias and stuff, just having a real hard time because of apparent abduction experiences and missing time. Didn't have a whole lot of conscious memories, but finally went under hypnosis and recalled fairly horrific medical experiments most of the time. He was healed twice, once of kidney stones and once of a mole. But, by and large, it was unpleasant for him.
Right.
And he finally had this one experience where he's abducted and he's talking to one of the Greys. It was a Grey. It was a female Grey, the commander of the ship, she said.
Okay.
And she says, I'm the commander, and I'm the only female to have ever reached this rank. Okay. Which I thought was interesting because that proved to me that there is sexual discrimination among the Grey population.
Right, that's what it sounds like.
And she says, well, we're done. Thank you for being a part of this project, and aren't you happy? We're so happy. Aren't you happy? And he's like, well, no, I'm mad as hell.
Right.
And she's like, you are? What's mad and what's hell? And that's when he realized they didn't understand. And he proceeded to explain, what anger was. And she's like, oh, we do have a lot of trouble with human emotions.
Right.
So I think a lot of times people are being contacted by what amounts to a police force, or a medical expert, or a tourist perhaps. They come in with different varying agendas. And sometimes it's not friendly because these guys have a job to do.
Right.
And they don't have time. They don't have time for niceties. Where I have to tell you, I've talked to people who've had very friendly experiences, and they're invited on board, and they're talked to, and everything's very friendly and amazing.
Right, and then there's others that have, and I've heard the separate, that there's some that it's like never again, like they feel very invaded and violated, for lack of a better word, but by what was done to them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one lady, I didn't interview her directly, but for that healing book, she had an experience where she had a gallstone. She was going to have her entire gallbladder removed because that's what they do. Okay. When in walks these ETs. Well, she doesn't remember. She just wakes up the next morning and she's got this scar.
Okay.
And the gallstone is removed. And somebody operated on her in the middle of the night. And she knows it was UFO related because she's had, UFO experiences.
Okay.
She was pretty upset even though they healed her. Because she's like, well, I just don't want people coming in to my house and operating on me without my permission.
Right. Oh, but at least she got some benefit out of it, in a way.
Right.
If you want to look at it that way, it's like okay, just don't do that again. And that's the thing that I wonder. That's another thing. These people that have these experiences, how do you ever know? Was this the last time? Is this ever going to happen again? Whenever. Yeah.
One lady I talked to, she's like, gosh, I'm 68. I forget what she said. Late 60s, and they still keep abducting me. I wish it would just stop. What do they want?
Right, exactly.
Because they were using her to have, babies and hybrid babies and eggs.
Okay.
And they were still taking her.
Right. I've heard also of certain bloodlines that, like, it's a family thing. Like, there's families that get abducted.
For sure. Yeah, I run into that a lot, but not always. There's one lady I talked to. Yeah, it just comes out of the blue. Here's a case that I wrote about in one of my books. This lady I worked with, actually, her name is Connie. She walks in, and I had a little gray statue, a statue of a gray, on my desk. Someone had just given it to me. And she screams when she sees it. And she's like, oh, what's that? I'm like, well, what do you think it is? That's a gray alien. She's like, I saw one of those. And she told me this story about when she had just had her son. He was a week old. She's sleeping in the master bedroom with her husband. Her son is by the picture window in the master bedroom. It's a huge window. You can't open it. It's fixed to the wall.
Right.
And she wakes up, Connie, in the middle of the night. She hears this squeaky sound, like someone rubbing on glass, and looks and sees this gray ET trying to get to her baby. And it's looking at the mobile above the crib. It's looking at her baby. And then it sees that Connie is, sat up and they lock gazes, and she is thrown back onto her bed with this force.
Okay.
She's not sure. And paralyzed, and she's crying. She can't scream out, but you can feel her tears going down the side of her head there. And this ET tries to open the window, which can't be opened doesn't
Okay.
open. And
Uh-huh.
usually I hear grays. They just walk through the wall. They just come wherever they want. This one couldn't figure it out. It was very weird, and it had little sucker cups on its fingers, little suction
Oh my
cups,
God.
which is very rare. But I
Ah.
do hear it,
Yes,
and
yes,
it's
I have heard of that.
just a weird case. And finally, it walks off, and Connie wakes up. She screams. She grabs her baby. She tells her husband. He's like, "You had a nightmare." She says, "No, I didn't."
Right.
That morning she leaves. Stays with her mom. She
I
says, "I'm not
bet.
coming back into the house." She says, "I'm not coming back to the house unless you buy 2 guard dogs,"
Okay.
which he did. And they just stayed there for another few months, and she couldn't. She's like, "No, we have to leave. I can't stay here." She'd
Yeah.
never had an UFO experience. Nothing in her childhood. No one in her family had.
Yes.
Her son, who the ET was interested in, hasn't. He's now full grown.
Right.
He's an executive at Pepsi, I think it is.
Well, no, but exactly. It's like she was. That's one of the hallmarks when you see this person is not like even as time goes by, you still have that fear, that overriding fear. I got to protect my kid and myself.
Yeah, well, I don't blame her at all because it's her baby,
Of
1 week
course.
old, and what I found is they have an absolute, Greys in particular, attraction to reproduction. Because
Okay.
this lady comes into the office. She was a new hire, and she found out, that I am a UFO investigator.
Okay.
And she's like, "Oh, the weirdest thing happened to me, and I was 9 months pregnant. I was, due to have my baby, or 8. I forget. It was like she was due, right?
Okay.
And she's driving down La Cienega Boulevard here in LA, which is a very crowded street.
Okay.
And this was about, early evening, dusk. And suddenly she notices there are no cars around her at all, which is impossible. It's just flat out not going to happen. And she's
Okay.
trying to figure that out when this grapefruit-sized orb of light starts rotating around her car in front of her windshield.
Oh.
And she's like, "Preston, do you think it was interested in my baby?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, I
Yes.
do." Because I keep seeing that exact type of thing. They come
Right.
they come right before you're about to have your baby, right after you've had your baby.
Right. And these are from people that don't know each other, and you're getting being told the same thing playing out. It's too much coincidence.
Yeah, yeah. One lady I talked to, she was pregnant with twins. There's a twin thing in this phenomena that's very interesting.
Okay.
That keeps turning up. And she was pregnant with twins, and one died in utero.
Okay.
And the chances of the other one surviving, the doctor told her, were probably not going to happen. 1 in a million, 1 in 5 million, actually, is what they told her.
Okay.
And so she was really worried. And
Yeah.
this UFO starts landing next to her house regularly, and she's getting pulled on board. The ETs were
Okay.
very, very interested in her pregnancy.
Okay.
So this is another case where they're, interested in reproduction, particularly
Yes.
a very unusual case.
Right. Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. This is yeah. We want to see it as it's happening. In other words.
Yeah, when she went to the doctor, the nurse is like, "I'm not supposed to tell you this, but your lab reports are being sent to some government agency."
Oh, I
Just
would
thought
have
you
been
should know
wigging
that.
out big time. See? I'd be
Right?
like, what?
I know another couple, they contacted me because they
So much for
had
HIPAA laws, huh?
right? Another couple I talked to on the East Coast, they were pregnant. She was pregnant,
Right.
full on, I believe it was 7 months when she lost her pregnancy
Wow.
due to a UFO experience. The baby disappeared,
What?
the fetus. And this is a missing fetus syndrome, which usually happens at like 3 months, maybe 2
Yeah.
months, 1
Uh-huh.
month.
Yeah.
But it does turn up, and she had it at 6 or 7 months, and was having a lot of trouble getting health care at that time because she
Okay.
was an immigrant,
Okay.
and couldn't get decent health care until this happens, and suddenly, but boy, are they interested in her case, and she's getting pushed up to the highest hospitals and getting all kinds of amazing care because
And she's thinking, yeah, how did this go? How did this happen?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, that becomes so interesting.
Right. And you know what the weirdest thing is? They were like totally okay with this. They were a young couple, really cute, very, very progressive, liberal, and we're like, yeah, ETs took our baby, and I hope it's in a good place. I'm like, well, yeah,
I mean, tell you something. So. I don't know. I'm sorry. No, I wouldn't be good with that. ET or not, no, that would not be. No, I'd be a nerve. I don't know how that's a very difficult thing to do or to handle, especially at such an advanced state in the pregnancy.
Oh man, I mean, one guy I talked to, he was, a gentleman, a nurse, had repeated abduction experiences and was really upset about it. It was very traumatic in his life. Mm-hmm. And finally, the Greys come and he has a fully conscious encounter where he's taken on board, and they said, you need to know why we contacted you, and here's why. This is your child, and isn't he beautiful? And the guy was like, oh my God, yes. But he was, very attracted to his child. At the same moment, utterly repulsed because it didn't look normal, and very angry at the ETs.
Talk about a Maury Povich moment.
Right.
Guess what?
You're the father.
You're the father. Man, let me tell you something. How do you get over something like that?
He had PTSD, actually.
I bet.
And was pretty upset because he's now knows he's got this child on a spaceship, which sounds crazy, but look at it this way. When someone is taken on board a UFO, and we know this abduction phenomenon is real, the single most common thing that people describe is being physically examined and having reproductive material removed. I wouldn't guess. I guess that there's humans up there being raised on UFOs. Utterly human.
And well, it makes you think, is it their interest? Is it because they have a fertility problem?
For sure. They have said that. They said that they have damaged their genetics, and this comes from, a dozen at least, independent accounts. The Greys have said that their genes have become damaged through chemical war or nuclear war or some sort of disaster. There's variations.
Okay.
And that they did once look human and are essentially human. So, there you go.
Let me ask you, do you think the theory that some of these ETs basically travel inter or intradimensionally versus, we always think of it in space as in linear space or light years, for example. Do you think that maybe how they're traveling is interdimensionally versus from another planet? Or maybe from another planet, but they found a way to do it via dimensions? There
are some theories that some of the Greys, at least, are time travelers, and you can march out a number of cases to support that. But I am a believer, after having been in this field for a long time, that and hearing about these metallic spaceships with little chairs in them and controls, and these are physical ships. These are physical bodies that, I believe we're dealing with ETs in the classic sense for the most part. I know there are researchers out there like Jacques Vallée and Lauren Coleman and others who kind of say, this is not necessarily ET. This could be wearing a mask and an intelligence taking on different forms, and that things like Bigfoot and ghosts and religious miracles and fairies.
Right. I know that Jacques Vallée, for example, the sightings at Fatima, he was saying that, what the children saw and then what everybody saw with the sun, the disc, and everything was really an extraterrestrial visitation versus a religious one.
Perhaps. I think there's probably some, misidentification going on, but I do believe we're dealing with separate phenomena.
Okay.
I don't believe ETs are demons. I looked into that. I don't believe they're angels.
Okay.
The literature on angels is very compelling, as is, on demons. They're separate phenomena, as is a near-death experience. It's not the same thing, which has similarities to a UFO abduction, for sure, but they're not the same. We're dealing with classic ETs from other planets who do have the ability to travel interdimensionally and have an understanding of the other side, the astral realms and the causal realms, and that we don't. And apparently have the ability to move through into other dimensions because they can shrink their ships, they can expand their ships, they can become invisible, they can.
Right. This is along the lines that I'm thinking that which might account like why sometimes they can disappear so quickly, or just different sightings that we can't explain if it was basically they disappear, in other words, or they come through out of nowhere, that kind of thing.
Yeah, we don't know quite where they're from, do we? I mean, the Betty and Barney Hill said they were from Zeta Reticula, and we got some cases that support that. But generally, they're really tight-lipped. They don't talk about where they come from. They're like, "Oh, we're from a place you don't know about yet," or "You wouldn't understand," or "It's not important." It's something I've heard. Yeah. So they're kind of coy and evasive, and perhaps understandably, considering we're violent and we do have access to technology to go to other star systems, apparently in military hands right now.
Wow. Now that's a mind bender right there. Like, yeah, and you know what? And sometimes don't get me wrong, I'm very much for technology and advancement in technology, but sometimes I feel that the people that basically have that knowledge it might get away from them, in other words. And in other words, and then everybody gets, for lack of a better word, screwed over. And we have nothing to do with it because we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. But they get overly ambitious, I guess, is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that's exactly the situation we're looking at. But we are seeing disclosure. And I do sympathize with the people who are in this situation and want to disclose, because I think there is certainly a faction that do want this information out, who are in control of it. Otherwise, we wouldn't be seeing any disclosure. And what we're not seeing is, whistleblowers being viciously attacked. Not really. Okay. There's some of that for sure. So I'm pretty hopeful that this is going to roll out. And it's to our government's benefit to do so. Because if they don't, they are liars. And liars aren't trusted. And people will lose all respect. And they will lose power because you can't, expect people to obey authority if authority is lying, and it's not going to happen.
You know what? I always think of, I'm thinking, okay, well, what is it that they could think? Okay, everybody will have a meltdown and the economy will collapse because people will just sit at home. And I'm thinking, okay, you know what? I don't think so. I think people will take about 24 to 48 hours, have a lot of stiff drinks. Of course, there's always going to be the extremists, which is the end of the world. And then the rest of humanity will turn around and say, okay, tell us everything. Okay, what are we dealing with?
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see open official disclosure until we have less wars, until we kind of come together as a species, because we're really divisive right now, which is, I think, an interesting symptom of us suddenly recognizing the level of corruption throughout the world.
But you know what, Preston? You want to see everybody get together real quick? Disclose about UFOs. Everybody then. Yeah. It's going to be a worldwide kumbaya moment. I'm telling you right now.
I think so.
It's like, what? I don't have a problem with any other country, about anybody, about anything. Forget it. That will make all of us, as in humans, like against the what? Yeah.
Yeah, and disclosure is not going to work if they just start showing us little films and pilot testimonies or a piece of metal, which is the rumor that's coming up. But look, here's a piece of Roswell metal.
Yeah, I know.
But what we need is the spacecraft and the bodies. And until you do that, people don't care, or they're not going to care.
Let me ask you, do you think, because I've heard also the theory that Roswell was a decoy, and that's something, and not that the crash and a recovery body didn't take place. It did. But there wasn't Roswell, and Roswell was just like a decoy. What have you heard about that? Is there any truth to that theory?
No, none at all. Roswell is the granddaddy case of UFO cases. We know for sure it happened because there's been a lot of researchers who've contributed to it, have basically interviewed people who saw this object coming down, who tracked it on the radar scopes, who went to the ranch, who lived on the ranch, who guarded the crash site, who carried the metal, who flew the metal, who analyzed the metal. So basically what we're saying is we've tracked every step of what's gone on with the Roswell case. It's been very well investigated. It absolutely did happen. It may not have been a crash in the classic sense. I think it was. But some people have pointed a very curious fact out, is that ETs can shut off whole neighborhoods. They can paralyze people. They're very in control. They could easily have recovered that themselves, is what some people are saying. But was it a gift to us? I'm not so sure that it would have been so easy. But gosh, I wonder about that. Why are there so many UFO crashes? Are they feeding us technology?
Or also, we might be assuming that because they might be advanced, that they're infallible, and they might not be infallible.
Yeah, they might. There's no evidence that they're actually smarter than us. Maybe just more an older society.
Yes, exactly.
More technologically advanced, for sure.
Yeah,
but exactly. Yeah, the Roswell is absolutely a real case. It's not the only one that happened at that time. There was a cluster of crashes in 1947 over New Mexico. This is, where we do a lot of atomic research, White Sands, the Holloman, and UFOs are very attracted to that. And there's been all kinds of UFO activity going on over White Sands from the beginning, including UFO crashes of all kinds.
What do you think about this movement that's going on right now? They're going to storm Area 51. What do you think about that? Is that going to be a wise thing to do or not?
Yes, I think it's wise because it lets people know that there is a force in government, and the most powerful force is the people. When an idea's time has come, right?
Right.
The president is powerful, sure. Congress is powerful.
No, but it's us, yeah.
But ultimately, it is the people who control things.
Yes.
And if you when an idea's time has come, nothing is going to stop it. Whether it's the civil rights movement or the Me Too movement or whatever.
Right. Well, the thing is that you always hear that the security around this area is so tight and so rigid and aggressive, for lack of a better word. It's like, I don't know how that's going to work. I mean, I wouldn't want anybody to get hurt.
Yeah, well, I think probably what's going to happen is some people are going to show up because it has gained traction.
Yeah.
It started out as a joke, but
you're right.
But it gained traction for a good reason because people are mad and they're not going to take it anymore.
Right.
I think there's a lot of feeling behind this phenomena and the cover-up, and people are sick of it. Yes. And so we're going to see, I don't know how many people, hundreds, thousands, maybe more. Okay. And I don't think they're going to run in Area 51. No, they will be shot, and that's not going to get to that level, obviously. If it did, that would be incredible to me.
I know.
Can't imagine that happening. But I do think there might be a confrontation. And I hope the press is there. And I hope the message, isn't this great? Let's get this subject, people talking about it. It's an important subject.
Right.
You may think, people say, I've never seen a UFO. Doesn't affect my life. Well, I got news for you. You're probably working 9 to 5, fighting for paycheck to paycheck. And when right there, our government has free technology that would change your life.
Wouldn't that be?
We could solve the energy crisis, the economic crisis, and the environmental crisis, and that's what we're going to do, and that's how it's going to roll out. And that's the way I'm envisioning it, because that's the only way we're going to get out of this. It's the only way.
I know what I think in a way people are kind of tired of disclosure from these people once they've retired. In other words, but they have no, sometimes they have proof, sometimes they don't. But everybody's like, because there's been a slew of people that have actually come forward, but once they're done, in other words, with their careers. And even then, some of them are worried. And I mean, I've heard a lot of different things about people, whistleblowers, that weird things happen to them. But I think people are beyond that. It's like you said, okay, we're enough. We want actual, one way or the other, we want the truth.
Yeah, and I think we're getting it. Paul Hellyer, Defense Minister of Canada, perfect example of what you're talking about. Someone who retired and now it's spilling beans. Mm-hmm. Or Senator Harry Reid, who's quite elderly and apparently is pushing this subject right now very hard because he doesn't want to wait too long.
Right. Well, that's
or it to be too late.
Yeah, some of these people basically, I don't know what I'm saying, but some of them almost have a 1 foot in the grave, and it's worrisome in a way because they're almost thinking this is the only time it's actually safe for me to come forward and talk about these things, which leads you to believe if they haven't been outright threatened, they know enough about the inner workings of the government or the armed forces, wherever it was that they worked in, to know if I ever talk about this, it's not only me, it's my family or whatever that are at risk.
Yeah, I came into this field, I was so naive. I had no idea there was cloak and dagger stuff and that people had died.
Yes,
been
yes.
killed. Robert Sarbacher, his death was unusual. He had done disclosure. James Forrestal was talking about disclosing, and his
Yes.
death was suspicious. President Kennedy is a
Right.
good example.
Yes.
So
Yeah, and there are
there,
people that commit suicide that it's like really questionable the circumstances and things like that. Yeah.
yeah, well, one time, shoot, I was doing my own investigation into the Topanga Canyon UFO wave. I
Mm-hmm.
was young, I was, vigorous, full of energy, and I was going door to door. I was putting up flyers. I'd given the police my number. There was this wave
Okay.
of sightings happening right over my community. I was going all out to
Okay.
investigate it. And I got this call, and this guy threatens me. He's like, and he starts out, yeah. He's like, I'm this colonel, and I've got a top secret clearance. And are you Preston Dennett? Are you investigating UFOs? I'm like, yeah. Super excited. I'm
Yeah.
like 24, 25 years old. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, right.
And he's like, well, you're barking up. What did he say? He says, what you're doing is dangerous. I'm like, it is. I'm like,
And you're like, what?
and he says, yeah, it's not what you think it is. I'm like, well, what is it? And he
Right,
says, well,
exactly.
and he was very evasive and coy, kind of, and just wouldn't answer my question. And he says, there's no pay dirt to it. And I thought to myself, well, hold on a second. Didn't you just say it was dangerous?
Right,
Because
yeah.
those two things are contradictory. And I kind of suddenly realized he was going through the techniques of persuasion to try to
Mm-hmm.
get me off investigating.
Yeah.
And I was ultimately really kind of excited about it. I believe in life after death. I'm ready, any day is a good day to die. I've
Right.
had out-of-body experiences. I know there's life after death.
Okay.
So I'm ready to, I'm not scared. Go ahead, threaten me. I was really excited. I'm going all the way with this. Is how I felt certainly at that time, and I still kind of feel that way.
And what happened?
Um,
Did you get any other phone calls?
no, I didn't, but I did have weird stuff happen. I did, and
Like?
like I would do interviews. I'd finally get someone on of a good case, and
Mm-hmm.
I'd call them up, and they'd be on the other. You could hear this tick, 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 and all this static. I'm like, what the heck? And the person is like, what's going on with your phones? And I'd be like, I don't know. I had a lot of phone problems. I did.
Yeah, like,
And my mail, this is back in the days when they didn't have email. I was
yes.
sent, I got 100 articles published in various magazines. I was sending them out. I was, sending all my stuff out and interviewing people. And my UFO mail came back opened more often than not, to the point
Really?
where I'm like going up to my mailbox. My sister was with me this time. It's a locked mailbox, by the way.
Uh-huh.
And in a secure condo complex, which is where I lived at that time.
Okay.
And I'm like, you open my mailbox, Victoria. You open it and you tell me what you think of my mail. Because I knew there was going to be stuff coming back to me daily because there was. I was very active.
Okay.
And but sure enough, the letter was opened. I'm like, does that look open to you? I mean, she's like, yeah, you should do something. I'm like, well, what am I going to do?
Against who? Like, who are you going to accuse, right? I mean,
Yeah, so there was that, and which is still just barely enough. Like, and did have I'd speak about the subject. I once had a heckler dressed up in a government suit.
I was about to say, no Men in Black? Did you ever have
Yeah,
any?
kind of. I mean, there was
Okay.
that guy, and he's like clearly a debunker. He was there to try
Okay.
and make me look like an idiot. And I'm like, and he's like, it's a weather phenomenon. What you're talking about is a weather phenomenon. And I schooled him. I let him know that, weather phenomena can't do this, that, and that, and other, and so on. It was a big case that I was talking about, the Topanga Canyon wave.
But you know what? It makes you
And,
think. Most people, to me, my understanding is most people that don't believe in it, they just stay home. It's like, okay, that crazy guy. In other words, when you see that much, how can I say, attempt to actually physically go somewhere and try to heckle somebody, like you said, it's almost like, wait a minute.
yeah,
So
he knew this was a real phenomenon. That was my
right,
impression, that he
right,
did
right.
believe in it.
Yes, that's exactly where I'm going with this. That
Yeah.
normally most people who don't believe it for whatever reason, everybody's got, that's their prerogative. They sit home and go, "Oh my, that guy's crazy." Okay, all right, I'll just they don't think about it.
Right?
But when you see that much
Yeah,
effort
and that
being put
like
into it,
I remember once I was at a convention and at my table selling books, and people come up, they share their stories. It's really cool. And this guy dressed up these government guys got a certain look. They're pretty slick.
Okay.
And this guy comes sauntering up, thinking he's, top banana, super cool, and he's got his mirrored sunglasses type thing. I don't think I actually had mirrored sunglasses, but that effect, you know what I mean?
Right.
And hair perfectly coiffed. And I was like, so what do you got? What hot cases? And I'm like, I'm not going to tell you. I just had the feeling he was a government guy.
Right.
And I was getting some hot cases, and I was talking to some military witnesses. And I don't know if I was ruffling feathers or not. I don't know.
Well, think about it. They're probably trying to get access to stuff that you have pre a writing of an article or a book. In other words, what you write, they already know about it. It's, okay, what's he working on now?
Yeah. And I'm perfectly willing to talk. I mean, I'm pretty much an open book. My research, it's why I'm doing it. I am compelled to let people know that this is real so they don't have to go through what I went through, which is finding out that this is real.
Right. Well, and that's the thing, that for a lot of people that, like I say, I tell people, there's a lot of people out there that have had experience, but they feel very isolated because they kind of almost fear that they're not going to be believed, that they're going to be made fun of, or in some cases, even depending on what job they have, that it might damage their career or their job, how they make a living. So I think that when they're able to talk to somebody, let's say like yourself, even if, let's say, they say, look, this has got to remain anonymous, it's got to be a load off of their shoulders, especially maybe when you turn around and you say, you know what, I've heard of similar things like what you've described.
Yeah, sometimes they start crying. My heart goes out to them.
Yes.
And people sometimes will tell me, like, oh, I haven't told a single person.
Yes.
I haven't told my wife.
I believe
this
that.
sort of thing.
I believe that.
So it's heartbreaking for some of these
people.
people.
No, everybody thinks sometimes that people out there are running around, everybody wants to tell their story. And you'd be surprised. I think there's a lot of people, that don't want to talk about it. They don't.
I have trouble convincing. Well, these days, I just interviewed this lady. I'm like, can I use your name? Her name was Melody. Mm-hmm. And she saw these ETs. She had 5 other people with her. And she was like, yeah, you can use my name. Last name Korn, Korn. Had this amazing encounter at Point Elementary School in Missouri.
Okay.
I'm working on a new book right now, Schoolyard Encounters.
Wow. Okay.
And it's so cool.
And is this something that happened to her, like as when she was a student there? Is that what happened with her?
Yeah, at elementary school. And what I've found is there's a very famous case in Zimbabwe, in Rua, Zimbabwe, where a UFO landed next to a school.
I've heard of that.
And aliens came out in 1994. It turns out there's about 5 or 6 really well-known cases just like that. One in Australia, one in Florida, one in Wales. And I started looking into it because I got my own case, and I found a bunch of them. I found 100. So this is a new book I'm putting together, and it's so amazing because half of these cases are over elementary schools.
Makes you
and
wonder,
they're coming down low.
Makes you wonder, is it children in general, or is it that there's certain students that are there that they're keeping their eye on?
I'm thinking it's children in general.
Okay.
Because it's just so widespread over schools.
Okay.
And generally speaking, everyone's seeing it. There are cases where people, there's just a few students seeing it, and they do have experiences later on. So maybe they are targeted there, and it just happens to be at school. But yeah, they seem to be interested in children, particularly very young children, because half the cases. And get this is amazing. 30% of the cases are landings or humanoids coming out. Wow. It's a lot.
Yes, that is. In other words,
right?
This is not like a far-off light in the sky somewhere.
No, typical sighting is a light darting across the sky, maybe hovering. Uh-huh. It's 5,000-10,000 feet up, and it zips off, and it's nighttime.
Right.
The typical schoolyard sighting is it's daytime. It's about 100 feet up, maybe 50 feet, maybe landing.
Okay.
It doesn't last for a few seconds. It lasts 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, 2 hours over a period of days. So these are not normal encounters by any means.
What do you think, Preston, about the that some people say there's a correlation with UFO sightings and sightings of cryptids? Do you think there's any merit to that?
I do. Okay. Yeah, because I've looked into, I've written about Bigfoot, done a bunch of Bigfoot research. Didn't want to, because I knew, I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to find out it's real, and do I really want to get into this? And sure enough, it was real. Okay. The evidence is absolutely overwhelming. But I have to tell you, Bigfoot, although being seen pretty much every state in the United States, all over the world, goes by different names.
Right.
Almost all of them do not involve UFOs. They just don't.
Right.
And for that matter, most UFO sightings, the vast majority, over 99%, don't involve cryptids. But there's that 1% where they perfectly intersect. And it's not coincidental because it's a crazy intersection where people see these things working next to aliens or inside the UFO or after or right before or during. Right. So like one guy I talked to, he had up in Canyon Country, California here, had a UFO land in his backyard. Next day, he had a Bigfoot encounter in the same place. That's just too weird.
And that's what I'm talking about. Even where it's not that they see them together, but it's almost like somebody, when they look at, okay, we have a spate of UFO sightings, but it just correlates with a spate of cryptid sightings at the same time. And
maybe it's almost a portal.
Right. That's what I was thinking. That something is...
or the veil has become thin there, or a portal, or an electromagnetic energy, a vortex, or just maybe the UFO did something.
Well, maybe when it comes through it, like when things come through with you, in that window of time that maybe that portal opens, things slip through. And I think also that might explain really weird cryptids that historically have been seen, besides, let's say, a Bigfoot type thing, other unusual cryptids that maybe you'll have hundreds of people in an area say they saw, and then it disappears. It's like maybe a 3 or 4 month period, and then it's gone. And it makes you think, did it go back? Was it able, another portal opened up and it was able to slip back, and that's why all the sightings stopped.
Right, like the chupacabra. There was a big wave of those, and that kind of faded away.
Right. And
or maybe we're not hearing about it because, waves are partly due to publicity. Someone coming forward, and then someone else saying, hey, I saw that on that same night. And then another person has the courage to tell their encounter, and then suddenly people are saying, oh, there's a wave of sightings happening. Well, no, it's been going on the whole time. It's just that this brave person here came forward and talked. I don't think that that's entirely true. I think that waves are a real phenomena, but that effect is something to consider.
People don't realize, though, sometimes, contrary to what, sometimes there is a certain stigma, let's say with coming forward and saying I saw this, because, and let's face it, you're the person that's going to stay living there with these neighbors that now are looking at you. You're thinking like, what's up with this person? So that's when you think twice. Do I really want to talk say anything about what I saw?
Right. Which is the problem. Which is the problem with our scientists and our political leaders. Remember, Dennis Kucinich said he saw a UFO. He was a political candidate. He saw a UFO.
That was the end of that. That was it. Well, we had, as a matter of fact, in this last these midterms, what was the office she was running for? I can't remember. I think she was going to be a senator. She's amongst her. That she said that she had a UFO sighting, and man, her opponent used that really a lot against her, like making her sound like she was not too well, okay, this person claims that she's seen a UFO. That was it. And I was like, man, that was a stupid thing to do. I hate to say it, but you gave your opponent a lot of ammunition.
Jimmy Carter survived it. He saw a UFO.
No, I know,
Ronald
but
Reagan as governor.
You know what? And maybe it's because that person she didn't couch it the right way. But I can tell you, looking at it from an observation point of view, she it was used in a bad way against her as a candidate. It really was. It really was, and it was like, man,
so unfortunate.
I know. So that's what I'm saying.
Looking into this. A lot of political leaders have seen UFOs. There was a former president of Mexico, a president of Brazil, I think, several senators, representatives, governors who've seen UFOs. Governor Fife Symington is one. He saw the Phoenix Lights. Governor Gilligan of Illinois, he saw a UFO. Senator Russell of Kansas, or no, not Kansas, of Virginia, I believe it was. He saw a UFO.
And you better believe there's a bunch more that probably have seen it and said, nah, I'm not going to talk about that. No. Or their advisors tell them, shut up! Whatever you do, be quiet. Don't ever talk about that again.
Yeah, I hope it comes up during this upcoming election. It should be interesting to see.
Let me tell you something. And sometimes
it won't.
It won't. Plus, and sometimes I wonder, really, do we have the super secret squirrel level of government, which are really the people that know? And it's not the public, the ones that the public know about. These are people behind the scenes that we don't know who they are, what department they are, okay, that are really the ones that pull the strings when it has anything to do with extraterrestrials and UFOs and things like that.
Yeah, but it appears that we do have a situation where there are people within government, in the House of Representatives and the Senate, who are aware of this phenomena and do interface with the so-called secret government, which is a real thing.
Right.
There is a large underground complex. It's not just Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado. Area 51 goes underground. Edwards Air Force Base goes underground. There's a lot of underground stuff that we don't hear about.
Right.
And definitely there's all kinds of scientific work and money being pushed into this subject that is absolutely secret.
Oh, sure. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. But how can I say? I think that there's players in there that have been there for years. In other words, that they're really the ones that if we saw them or we heard their names, we wouldn't know who they were.
Yep, I totally agree. There's people who live very different lives than us.
Oh yeah,
have levels of technology that are mind-blowing. For instance, we know that we've got crashed UFOs. Well, the technology taken from UFOs is not just like magnetic motors. It's healing technology. Wow. People have reported being healed by laser-like instruments. Well, we've got those, and there are people who are using that.
It would be horrible to think that because there's more money being made out of treating an illness versus curing it, that they would let people, basically suffer because there's more money in treatment than there is in curing.
Yeah, that's why healthcare in our country is going through such upheavals right now, and I think that we should release this UFO technology.
Yeah.
And if they want to charge us, fine. If you want to keep us poor, fine. Just let us live.
Well, let me tell you something. Let me ask you. Who was it the other day I was talking? I said, what was the last thing that you heard that was cured? I said before they cured polio, they cured TB, they cured a bunch of really serious diseases. I said, what was the last thing that you heard that we had a cure for? Not treatment, a cure. And I said, It's been a really long time. And back then, when these cures were found, the medical equipment, or the laboratory equipment was much more primitive than what we've got now. Okay? We did not have an understanding of the genome, of all the other stuff that we have now, CRISPR, blah, 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 blah. And they still were coming up with these cures to terminal diseases or stuff like polio that was heartbreaking for people that had it. And I said, what was the last thing that you heard that we had a cure for? And it was like, I think it's been 60 years, 7? I don't know.
Yeah, I looked into this because, writing a book on healings, one thing I did, which I found really interesting, was to see what, people are dying from. What are the top 10 causes of death in the U.S. and the world? And, it's generally heart disease, cancer, respiratory disease, accidents was up there. I was shocked to find out that the 10th leading cause of death in the United States was suicide. Yes. I found was that ETs have cured. There's various cases where people have been cured of all the top 10 causes of death, whether it's heart disease, cancer, or whatever. So ETs are curing people on a very limited basis, but I think no better than to just cure everyone.
Well, it's like everything. It's like all these diseases. Like once upon a time, there was, like the turn of the century, we had tuberculosis running rampant, where they built these huge hospitals just to keep these people that were contagious away from the general population. And because at that point, the majority of people, sooner or later, you were going to succumb to it. And they got cured. And so that's what I'm saying. I mean, I guess my point is that I think that as humans, we do have the power of, through research, you would think, of coming up with cures eventually. But what happened? We seem to have come to a standstill with that. Whether we have the knowledge and we're not using it, whether we came up with it on our own, or maybe it was given to us via extraterrestrial. I mean, but still, again, I think that's very interesting as far as what you were talking about as far as health, what's happening with us as human beings as health-wise. We're always going to have something wrong depending on genetics and lifestyle, of course, But I think that there's a lot more money being made in treating us. How's that?
Right, and that's a problem for sure, obviously. Yeah. Because how if disease is a business, I mean, where does that leave us?
That's exactly where I'm going with that. Yeah.
Not in a good place. But I'm still hopeful. I am.
Because no, I am too. I'm hoping that at some point, or that the value of human life is going to be more important than anything else, which is the way it should be. But that's when you're like very idealistic,
Well, I mean, if you look at generation from generation, what we see is an absolute spiritual progress.
Yes.
Which has been pretty slow, considering we've been around for, supposedly modern humans have been around at least 40,000 years. I think it's probably much longer than that. I'm not sure we even evolved on this planet. I doubt it.
Right.
Because we have human-looking, we've got human-looking ETs. I mean, how would you explain that?
Right. Exactly.
But yeah, it does appear that for 40,000 years we've been living in squalor and war and disease, and rose up out of it through the Middle Ages into the Age of Enlightenment. This last 100 years, we've done really, really, really well.
Yes, we have.
So I mean, we've doubled our lifespan over the past 100 years.
Yeah, just by washing our hands. I mean, what I mean by that is the recognition of germs and and stuff like that, and disinfecting stuff. That alone was killing a lot of people before. A lot. Something as simple as that.
And if you look at how women were treated throughout human history, now we're having some amazing revolutions that have never been seen before.
Well, before a lot of women would die in childbirth because of that, because the way they were treated during child, they would get fevers because the people that were handling her and the baby they wouldn't wash their hands. Something as simple as that, believe it or not.
Yeah. So now we've got the knowledge. We're in a new age. Young people are gonna rescue our planet. We're seeing this sort of movement where the students are walking out of schools, protesting, the lack of action to prevent climate change.
Well, no, it's.
So
and let's face it, nowadays, at the rate, and that's another thing, lifespans being what they are, it's not like before where people were, the average lifespan was maybe 50, 60, 70 kind of, and that was even then. Now, lifespans are getting longer, and it's like, okay, well, if you're going to, unless, of course, accident or maybe some fatal disease, you have a very long life to live on this earth. So you have to think of what is the quality of my life and those around me, and for your children, and it's you have to think beyond yourself. In other words, as far as what's going on with a lot of different things, In
terms of longevity, a number of people have told me that they feel the ETs have increased their lifespan. And made them healthy. One guy, I didn't interview him directly, but I got his story. Jim Law of Gainesville, Florida, was having contact with gray ETs. This is so interesting.
Okay.
He had this hernia, and he's like, if you're going to abduct me, why don't you cure my hernia?
Let's make a deal here, man. Okay.
Yeah, because he was talking to him at this point. He'd gotten over a lot of his fear. And they're like, we know the problem of which you speak, and we will fix it. That's what they said. And they did. They fixed it. Great. He's like, wow, can you tell me why you're contacting me? And they said, yes. We are very interested in your ability, your genetic propensity to live a long time.
Really?
And that was really interesting to him because he was writing a book about his grandfather who was 115 and still spry and healthy and doing his thing.
Right. No, I had a granduncle that died at 110, and I mean, from what I understand, I think that they say that our human bodies should last more or less about 125. Of course, there's a lot of different things, but yeah.
I think we're going to see longer than that. I know people have said, oh, there is a limit to human lifespan, but we're looking at ET accounts, and they're like, no, they're 200, 300 years old. Some people have asked, like, you're old. How old are you? 300. And these are generally, not human looking, but it's my understanding that, the Pleiadians say that they live much longer.
But then, of course, if you're having a problem, though, with your fertility, that presents a problem, even if you have a longer lifespan. If you can't reproduce, that could also be a problem for, in other words, if you have finite amount of members of your civilization or species, for example, then who cares if you live a long time? You better find a way to reproduce, or, in this case, hybridize with something very similar, because otherwise that'll be the end of us eventually.
Yeah, I wonder how numerous the Greys are. I have the feeling that just kind of, I haven't analyzed it right, but just based on what I've learned, that they're very numerous. And there's a lot of them. So as far as them having trouble reproducing, we hear it all the time. And they have trouble because they've over-cloned themselves and do not, generally speaking, sexually reproduce like we do.
So
but that's not
cloning,
true either.
Yeah. That copy of a copy, you start losing the quality. In other words,
right? Yeah.
I could see that happening.
But I feel like there's a lot of them. This experience has been going on for, since 1950s at least. We've got abduction reports at least dating to the 20s. They're not numerous, but boy, from the 50s onward, it's pretty much nonstop and still going on, by the way.
I'm sure there's people out there that had abductions. They just did not know how to relate it. Like how do I describe this? Especially like if, let's say, this was before the time of, let's say, planes or anything. How do I describe? Like, in other words, they kind of like, talk about wanting to keep it to yourself, but they had no way of relating it. And of course, nobody was writing about it. And what was it when Orson Welles did that War of the Worlds transmission that everybody was like running around thinking it really was? In other words, that people back then, it was very limited as far as a concept of extraterrestrials, which totally was on the negative side. And then, of course, how do you talk about, I think I was abducted or I saw something that looked like this?
Yeah. I think that's why I think it's a very widespread phenomena.
More than what a lot of people think, I think.
Which is both concerning and comforting, kind of. Because I don't like mystery. I don't like these guys sneaking around at night. I don't like them abducting people without permission. That's a crime. On every country on our planet, kidnapping is a crime. You can't do that.
But you know what? Sometimes, I hate to say it, if you want to look at it from the human perspective, that if it serves scientific purposes, it's like almost like a forgiven, like, maybe in their mind we're doing it for whatever, our benefit or theirs or a joint thing. So, maybe we're being invasive and violating whatever, but it serves a higher purpose.
Yeah, I think it's an emergency. Is what I honestly think. They're like, we're really sorry, but this has to be done.
Right.
We're dying here.
Right.
And we've got to do this. Or perhaps they're saving our own lives.
Right.
Or we do get a benefit. Well, one lady's like furious, and she started talking to this channeler who channeled a Gray who apparently abducted her. And she was like talking to him, and the Gray said, "We have given you a great benefit in your psychic abilities, and that is our gift to you." And she did. She had these amazing healing abilities.
Yeah, but still. But you know what? I guess it's different. And of course, we're looking at from a human a perspective, our moral compass, which is an asking permission. Okay? And sometimes I think they bypass that because maybe their moral compass is not exactly the same as ours.
Yeah, I think that, I don't know. I feel like people know what's right and what's wrong, no matter what species you are. I
Well,
feel there's
but it's almost like
a universal set of code.
right, like, but they almost, or like you said, maybe they feel that because of certain factors that we don't understand or don't know about, it's like that's the overriding. We have to do this.
Yeah, or perhaps that they're like, well, we created you, we're
Yeah.
basically you're our pet,
Yeah.
or
Oh, that's a horrible thought. That's a horrible thought.
well, I mean, for all we know, that's they because there's a sort of this is something people have told me that they feel a kind of an arrogance from these guys.
You know what? Considering that we think we're at the top of the food chain, when I say because of our technology, not physically, because in reality, physically, we're kind of weak when it comes to the animal world, but because of technology and our brains, we're at the top of the food chain. That'll put us in our place, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and that's what we've seen throughout history. Is like, no, it turns out Earth isn't in the center of the universe. No,
Yeah.
the sun does not revolve around us. We
Yeah.
revolve around the sun.
Yeah.
And things like that, and evolution, and perhaps we are connected to other animals in ways that we don't understand.
Right, right. Well, I mean, God knows. I mean, it's one of those things where I think it's a Pandora's box. Some of the things that are going to come out of it are going to be very good, and then others are going to be initially very horrible or frightening until we kind of like wrap our heads around it. But I think initially, but that's the thing. I don't think you can. If you want to know, I would rather know everything, even if some of the stuff you find out is disagreeable.
Right. Well, the way I feel is like what's true is true. Truth kind of takes care of itself. And if you're not willing to face something or deal with it, you don't have to experience
Preston?
that.
There's a lot of people out there that they don't want this. A lot of those hardcore skeptics, really, at the base of their skepticism is fear. Like, how do I fit this into my reality of the world? Okay.
Right. And I apologize to them, but they have to do their homework. It's not healthy to stick head and remain ignorant. And I understand that this is a core belief. It's like politics. It's like sex. It's like, these sort of core beliefs we have that people don't like to talk about because it gets us into arguments.
Well, and some people, let me tell you something, but some people are, they're very much into everything has got to fit into my mindset of the world the way it is. And if I admit with the thought of extraterrestrials, then what else that I think that doesn't exist, it does exist. It's like, I don't want to let that come in because that's it. And they can only function within a very narrow scope because, of course, what comes with that is a lot of other things. Think about it. All the things that we're told that doesn't exist or that's not true, blah, 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 blah. Then it's like, okay, wow, that could go off, like I say, into the never, never of the possibilities of different things, just besides the existence of extraterrestrials.
Yep, I know people who will never believe in UFOs, even if one lands. Maybe if they have to.
Yeah, it's like all of a sudden, all the news channels are flashing. It's like, okay, not all of this that this is happening. God,
but for that matter, I know people who have the emotional range of a gray alien. they're not very open-minded or emotional.
I know.
That's just who they are.
Yeah, there's going to be people that are going to go and hide in their basements, and that's the end of that.
No need to do it. It's a good news. I think the UFO phenomena is good news for humanity.
Yes, I think so. I think, it's a little bit unnerving, but overall, I think it's going to be positive. I agree with you. I think it's inevitable that at some point we're going to have to deal with the truth of that. Not only are we not the only, sentient beings out in the universe, but that they've been visiting us. And I think what's really most frightening for most people that technologically they're more advanced than we are.
Yeah, I think it's cool though. I mean, I would love to ride aboard a UFO. I've seen some of this stuff. I've seen a UFO, and I can tell you their technology is amazing.
Right.
They're beautiful. Oh my gosh.
But you know what? I think a lot of people, they're fascinated, but at the same time they're thinking, okay, if this is obviously more technologically advanced, we are basically hoping that they'll be kind to us. But we're going to be at if we might be at the short end of the stick if this ever goes, the wrong way, obviously. And I think that's what unnerves a lot of people about going down that rabbit hole of extraterrestrials and admitting to it, etc. And then what comes out. We might be just like a reality moment where we're not everything we thought we were.
Right. Honestly, I'd feel a lot better if our government said, gosh, there's these gray aliens and we have no idea. Let's all get together and work.
Yeah.
I'd feel a lot better because we do have a lot of bright people.
Yeah, of course. And that would be the best thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, together with love, that reduces the fear element for sure.
Of course.
It's the unknown that causes fear, and having your own government lie to you causes distrust. It's the wrong thing to do.
Course. And also, sometimes people do imagine things that maybe there is no reality to certain aspects of this. Maybe there's things that doesn't know that is not true, and it's like, okay, but this is, So in other words, when they kind of come forward and actually say what they know, like I said, I'd rather know the truth than just be deceived or people's imaginations, thanks to Hollywood. That'll take us in a lot of different directions when it comes to, are they friendly? Are they not friendly? Are they going to conquer us? Are they going to enslave us? Or like in the Twilight Zone, are they going to cook us? Whatever. Do they have a cookbook up there on that ship?
It's a cookbook.
It's a cookbook. But anyway,
I'm hopeful. Preston, I think we're in for good news.
I think that I agree with you. I think that definitely it's only a matter of time, and that despite everything, it's a mixed bag. But overall, it's going to be a positive for us as a species, for humankind.
I agree.
I believe that. Well, anyway, I wanted to thank you so much for coming and doing this interview. You have been so fascinating because you have so many years of having that, what I consider so important, that one-on-one, basically having people, ordinary people, tell you their stories, their encounters. Okay? People that maybe if it wasn't for the fact that they were able to talk to you, would have gone to their graves with their experiences. And like I said, after a while, the odds are too much in favor of this being actually a reality of our world. We just don't have to wait for it to be official. How's that? Because I think sometimes we're waiting for that official stamp, but it's like, yeah, we better get used to the idea, official or not, that that we are, when we have been for quite a while, I believe. Being visited by extraterrestrials.
I agree. You only need yourself to know what's real.
Absolutely. Again, thank you so much. You have been wonderful. And by the way, for my podcast listeners, what's your website address?
If you just Google my name, it should take you there. The actual address is Preston. The actual address is prestondennett.weebly.com.
Okay. I'm going to have a link on the credits of the show for it, but just in case for somebody that's
all my
listening.
Books are there.
Okay, perfect.
All my books are there, and people can contact me through my website if they have a story or a comment or.
That's where I was going with that. Also, yeah, if you've got a story. If they've got a story, they can contact you about that, right? Any encounters that they've had?
Always love hearing from new people. Yeah.
Perfect. Great. Okay, thank you so much, Preston. It has been wonderful. Take care.
Thank you. Had a blast.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
God, wasn't he great? Yeah, baby. Let me tell you. See, that to me is, again, this is controversial, but not controversial. Nowadays, it's not controversial anymore. Even though sometimes it makes you think, is there something, I don't know. But when somebody, let's say like him, that's spoken to so many different people, okay, yeah, you're going to have the people that maybe are lying, and the people that believe it, but it's not really real. It's just, or maybe they had a sighting, and it's a plausible explanation, but they ran with the UFO thing. Okay, if you take those out of the numbers, you still come up, it's too many people having certain experiences, whether it's a sighting of a UFO or an actual abduction, or there was once, that there's got to be something to it. And then, you go with all these people that are whistleblowers that have come forward after, let's say, serving many years, whether it's in the government or in the armed forces, and they kind of like almost feel guilty that they don't want to die, thinking, you know what, everybody else should know about this. I don't feel right dying and not saying my piece. And maybe I kept quiet because I depended on my job, or maybe they even threatened me, or I knew something's going to happen to me or my family. But now I don't feel right dying and keeping this to myself. And a lot of people have come forward under those types of circumstances. And you're going to think, okay, what? All these people that in some instances held actual important positions, again, whether it was in the government or in some type of the branch of the armed forces, that all of a sudden these people are going to go, they're going to, I have nothing better to do. I'm just going to make up this really convoluted story about, things I saw or overheard or was brought into, and I was told in no uncertain terms, you're not allowed to talk about this. Sometimes, from what I understand, even with your spouse. And I think sometimes, in some instances, if it wasn't told directly, it was implicit. The ones here that are at risk is not only you, it's your family. And think about it. Most people, that'll stop most people. Even the person that's saying, you know what, I'm willing to, depending, of course, on what they know. But when you start talking about, hey, it's not only my future, but it's my family, my children, their future, their well-being, whether it's monetarily or sometimes safety-wise, why not? If you really want to go down that very dark rabbit hole of coercing somebody to keep quiet, sure, I do believe that that's happened. I think that's happened a lot. And I think a lot of people that had a lot of knowledge just said, you know what, even when I'm gone, I'm not going to leave this on my family. I don't want nobody coming snooping around thinking, how much did he disclose to his family or his children before he died? I know that sounds very conspiratorial, but depending, maybe you were this type of person that was privy to certain information, or you saw this work against other people. Or what if you were one of the persons that was in charge of making sure that, that person is starting to talk, or this person has that knowledge, and we got to make sure that person stays quiet. What if you're one of those people that was in charge of making sure? In other words, you're a Men in Black. Okay, let's go with the Men in Black there, because some people say Men in Black are maybe actually extraterrestrials, but let's go with the Men in Black as in government, like real human beings. What if you were a Man in Black, and that was your job? To stoop around and visit people, or eavesdrop on them, or follow them, or for the ones that were getting too loose in the mouth, make sure that they didn't talk. If anybody's going to be aware of what lengths, they're going to go to make sure people don't talk about something or get the attention, it's that. And if you want to talk about anybody who probably did know a lot of secrets, it would have been a Men in Black. And you could say, well, were these people psychopaths or sociopaths that were, basically hired by the government to do this really dirty work? Oh, possibly. But not everybody's going to fit the bill. What if you were one of these operatives who that was your job, and you're following orders, and you're being told, you know what, for government, for your country, you need to make sure that this person never ever talks about it, or we've heard that this person is talking about this. This is whether it was a regular person on the street who saw something, or somebody that was in the government, or again, armed forces, whatever. And you're being told, you know what, you need to make sure that this person understands that they can never talk about that, or you need to. Now, can you imagine if this was your job? And talk about somebody that probably knows a lot of stuff from a lot of different cases. Okay, because yeah, you might have this one person who has information about this event or something. But if you're the person that's going from here to here to here to here, maybe through some type of different years, throughout a span of time, and you might be aware even of things that even the general public never knows about, but you were there to be the heavy, in other words. Can you imagine being that person? Do you think you would ever talk? Maybe being aware of what lengths, whoever, whether it's the government in general or that ultra, like I say, secret squirrel department, deep department, which is basically held the reins on this whole extraterrestrial, ET, back engineering, the whole whatever. I'm not talking, because from what I understand, sometimes they would assign people like, somebody way at the top. In other words, you've seen what lengths will be taken to make sure that people don't talk or keep silent or don't disclose man, in other words, yeah, you would have a wealth of information, but you would be the first one to say, man, I can never talk about it. Because even if I'm, let's say I retire and I'm older, if I ever say anything, or I write a book or do an interview, what's going to happen to my family? Because think about it. What if you are one of these people that was a Men in Black? And let's not go with a book. Let's say something, you have an injury. You finally hook up with a Preston or somebody like that. And you say a little bit, just a little bit of what you know, or a case. And those people go, hey, wait a minute. He's talking about that, but he knows all about these other things, all these other cases, all these other things that we did. Well, he's almost dying, or he died, or he's like 80 or whatever. Or he's got a terminal illness and he's going to be... You don't think, depending... They're saying, okay, yeah, but you know what? What has he told any of his family about all the other things that he saw or did? How about close friends? We need to find out. Yeah, he's telling a little bit, but he knows a lot. We need to find out. Is he disclosed to other people? If you don't think that guy that was an enforcer knows about that. So that's what I'm saying. I think that there's a lot of people that know a lot more, deeper, darker stuff, that they're saying, I can never, ever talk about this, no matter what. Even if I'm old, even if my career is over, even if I'm retired, because I'm still going to put a bullseye on my family because of the amount of information that I knew about. And they're going to be wondering if I disseminated more of it to people that were my family. And some of it could be, I imagine, really highly sensitive. And let's face it, people, knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. Okay? Knowledge, not only the knowledge itself, but the timing of it. Let's go with the, let's say what Preston was talking about. That we are aware of cures for certain diseases because of contact with extraterrestrials, or because extraterrestrials have shared this knowledge with us. This is a hypothetical, but not far-fetched. Okay? If it ever came out, somebody says, yeah, extraterrestrials kind of like either gave us the cure or steered us in the right direction so we could do the research that would produce the cure for this disease, this terminal disease. How long has the government or whoever known about it? Well, quite a long time. Can you imagine how that? Or what if, which I was telling him about, what if you're the government and they kind of like fess up, but then they say, well, yeah, we have this amount of information, and maybe we've been able to back engineer certain things, but there's other research that's been carried that we've lost control of because they've been taken over by private corporations who have state-of-the-art laboratories somewhere in other different parts of the world where we have no say-so. In other words, they're on an equal footing with us as governments. So we really don't have control over what they're researching, what they've come up with, whether it's knowledge, cures, technology. And you imagine people would be like, what? Because remember, we always think of our governments as being the end-all, be-all of control over all of this. You know, once upon a time, research was carried out like through major universities, and then of course they would get grants or the government would fund them and blah, 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 blah. Maybe a perfect let's say Indiana Jones. Indiana Jones, he was a professor at a major university, and the government would come to him and would dispatch him on these things. And of course, this is stuff, for instance, but it's made up. But before, the government would go to these major universities, and basically, they would be running the show because they were funding the research or the departments. But what if now the one that's doing all the research, these ultra tech labs, is a private corporation? It's not a government. And they're doing it out of laboratories in certain parts of the world where, let's say, for example, the U.S. government has no say-so. I mean, that's a real dark rabbit hole to go down as far as when we start talking about extraterrestrials. What we know, what we don't know, who knows it, who is the one that's the repository of the information, or maybe it's only partial, or again, let's say you are a private corporation that have been able to engineer the cure for certain diseases or illnesses. And you're thinking, you know what? We can make a lot more money if we, out of this research that we got because of our ET connection, whatever. More money to be made out of treating it. Pills, whatever. Now, you cure somebody, that's it. They're cured. And of course, people will say, well, because let's face it, humanitarian-wise, if there's a cure come up, the government is going to clamor this should be available to everybody. Not, which is me being idealistic, but that's the way it should be, right? And they're saying, well, if we come up with a cure, that'll be the end of that. Person's cured. They get a shot, a treatment, as in certain pills, cocktails, and that's it, they're cured. That's it, they're done. Or we get treatment, we can control the symptoms, but that could go on for years. It could go on for the person's entire life. That's a lot of money to be made. A lot. So, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of different things out there that come with this. But I agree with Preston. I think it's only a matter of time how they're going to break the news to us. But like I said, I think the moment is coming sooner or sooner. And I'm very interested to see what happens with this Area 51 confrontation that's coming up. How they're going to handle that. It's going to be really interesting. Okay, guys, I hope you like this show. I have a lot of fantastic guests coming on. Different topics. So stay tuned. Thank you again for coming back every week. I truly appreciate it. So take care.